Imagine a housing project so grand it was hailed as the future of urban living. Pruitt-Igoe, a modernist utopia in 1950s St. Louis, promised to transform lives with its sleek design and affordable homes. Yet, just 2 decades later, it became a crumbling symbol of failure, brought down in a series of dramatic demolitions. So, what went wrong? It wasn't just the buildings, it was the system. Segregation policies and economic decline trapped residents in poverty, while the city's middle class fled to the suburbs, taking vital tax revenue with them. Pruitt for black residents, Igoe for whites. But as desegregation took hold and white flight drained St. Louis of its middle class, the project's funding collapsed, maintenance budgets shrank, elevators broke down, trash collection stopped. Residents were trapped in poorly lit, crime-ridden towers. Without jobs or support, desperation grew. By the late 1960s, Pruitt-Igoe was plagued by crime, poverty, and neglect. The ambitious design, which isolated residents in massive, impersonal blocks, only made things worse. It became a textbook example of how top-down urban planning can fail. In just 2 decades, the grand experiment ended in implosion, literally. But the failure of Pruitt-Igoe wasn't just about bricks and mortar. It exposed the flaws of a system that ignored economic realities, racial inequality, and the importance of community. The ruins of Pruitt-Igoe prompt us to reflect. How can we design cities that uplift communities rather than divide them? In 1960, Brazil unveiled Brasília, a futuristic capital built from scratch in the country's heart. Designed by architect Oscar Niemeyer and urban planner Lucio Costa, it symbolized progress, equality, and a new national identity. The city's striking airplane-shaped design featured broad avenues, modernist buildings, and neatly segregated zones for work, living, and leisure. Although Brasília was celebrated as a masterpiece of modern urbanism, its promise of equality faltered. Built for cars, not people, the city prioritized form over function. Its wide open spaces and rigid zoning left residents isolated, with limited public transit and walkability. Perhaps most striking is the social divide it created. Wealthier residents live in the planned core, while lower-income workers are pushed to satellite cities far from the center. This divide contradicts the utopian ideals Brasília was meant to embody. Today, Brasília is a UNESCO World Heritage Site celebrated for its bold vision. But it's also a cautionary tale, a city designed for efficiency but criticized for neglecting the human experience. Can a city designed for the future truly thrive without addressing the needs of all its people? Welcome to Kowloon Walled City, once the densest place on Earth, a city within a city where over 30,000 people lived crammed into just 6 acres. But this wasn't your typical urban area. It was a labyrinth of narrow passageways, illegal structures, and an ungoverned existence unlike anything the world had seen. The walled city began as a Chinese military fort, but after Britain leased Hong Kong in 1898, it became a legal gray zone that was claimed by China but largely ignored by British authorities. By the mid-20th century, it had morphed into a self-regulated world, home to refugees, unlicensed dentists, noodle factories, and countless families. With no official oversight, residents built upward, layer by layer, creating a chaotic patchwork of homes and businesses. Electricity was tapped illegally. Plumbing barely worked. Sunlight rarely reached the ground. Yet, despite the chaos, a strong sense of community thrived. Neighbors supported each other, and life carried on. By the 1990s, the Hong Kong government demolished the walled city to make way for a park. Today it's remembered as both a marvel of human resilience and a stark example of the limits of unregulated urbanization. Chandigarh, the first planned city of independent India, was born out of necessity after the partition of 1947 left Punjab without a capital. In the 1950s, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru envisioned a city that symbolized progress, modernity, and a break from colonial pasts. Swiss-French architect Le Corbusier was chosen to design this ambitious project, assisted by a team of architects and planners. Le Corbusier's vision for Chandigarh was rooted in modernist principles. The city was divided into sectors, each functioning as a self-contained neighborhood with housing, schools, shops, and green spaces. Unlike chaotic traditional sites, Chandigarh prioritized order and functionality, with wide roads, a grid layout, and extensive landscaping. Chandigarh's capital complex, featuring the Secretariat, High Court, and Legislative Assembly, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Open Hand Monument, a symbol of peace and reconciliation, reflects the city's ethos. Despite its meticulous design, Chandigarh has faced challenges. Its rigid sector system, designed for smaller populations, struggles with urban sprawl and increasing traffic. Critics argue that the city prioritizes cars over pedestrians, limiting accessibility. Today, Chandigarh stands as a landmark of urban planning and modern architecture. While it inspires cities worldwide, its evolution highlights the need for adaptability in design to meet the changing demands of urban life. In the 1980s, Boston faced a crisis. The elevated central artery, a 6-lane highway slicing through the city, was choking under the weight of traffic. Commutes stretched endlessly, pollution filled the air, and the city's historic charm felt overshadowed by its failing infrastructure. Enter a project so ambitious it promised to redefine urban planning, the Big Dig. But what began in 1982 as a $2.8 billion dream quickly spiraled into one of the most controversial infrastructure undertakings in history. Engineers proposed burying the highway beneath Boston's bustling streets, constructing the massive Thomas P. O'Neill Jr. Tunnel, and extending Interstate 90 through the Ted Williams Tunnel to connect downtown to Logan International Airport. The project would also include the striking Leonard P. Zachem Bunker Hill Memorial Bridge, a beacon of modern design. Yet, as deadlines slipped and costs ballooned to an astounding $15 billion, cracks, both literal and figurative, began to appear. Leaks plagued the tunnels, political battles erupted. Then, in 2006, disaster struck. A ceiling panel collapsed in the Ted Williams Tunnel, tragically claiming the life of a motorist and casting doubt over the entire project. And yet, despite the turmoil, the Big Dig transformed Boston. It tore down barriers, reconnected neighborhoods, and created over 300 acres of parks. Travel times dropped dramatically, and the city's skyline was reborn. So, was it worth it? The Big Dig stands as a testament to bold ambition and a stark warning of the high cost of dreaming big. Tucked away in the bustling heart of Mumbai, Dharavi is a place like no other. It's a sprawling sum, yet it's a microcosm of ingenuity, survival, and community spirit. With over 1 million people packed into just 2.1 square kilometers, an area roughly the size of 393 football fields, imagine each field holding over 2,500 people. It's one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Yet, Dharavi is a thriving city within a city. Once a swampy marshland, Dharavi grew into a powerhouse of small-scale industries. From recycling Mumbai's waste to producing garments, pottery, and leather goods, it's an economic engine generating an estimated $1 billion annually. Its narrow alleys buzz with activity, each corner filled with factories, shops, and homes, all coexisting in a delicate balance. However, Dharavi's success story isn't without its struggles. Crumbling infrastructure, poor sanitation, and overcrowded living conditions paint a stark contrast to its industrious side. The people here face daily hardships, yet their resilience is undeniable. The community bonds are strong, and mutual support is the foundation of life here. Redevelopment plans have sparked controversy, with fears of displacement and gentrification. Still, Dharavi remains a symbol of the human spirit, thriving against all odds. It's a reminder that even in the toughest circumstances, innovation and hope can flourish. Dharavi's story is one of survival, hustle, and dreams alive and beating in the heart of Mumbai. What if your dream home turned out to be built on poison? In the 1970s, that nightmare became a devastating reality for the residents of Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York. A once thriving community is now a symbol of corporate negligence and environmental horror. It all started in the 1940s when the Hooker Chemical Company buried over 21,000 tons of toxic waste in an abandoned canal, equivalent to the weight of about 140 blue whales. For decades, the site lay undisturbed, until the 1950s when a neighborhood was developed right on top of it. People moved in, unaware of the deadly chemicals buried beneath their homes. By the 1970s, residents began noticing alarming health problems like birth defects, cancers, and miscarriages. It wasn't until Lois Gibbs, a concerned mother, began digging for answers that the truth surfaced. The toxic waste was leaching into the soil, contaminating the air, water, and food supply. In 1978, the US government declared Love Canal a federal disaster zone, and more than 800 families were evacuated. The area was sealed off, but the damage had already been done. The Love Canal disaster ignited nationwide outrage and spurred the creation of new environmental laws, including the Superfund Act, forcing corporations to take responsibility for hazardous waste sites. Love Canal's dark legacy reshaped environmental policy and remains a haunting reminder of the deadly consequences of negligence. What led to the decline of Detroit, the city that once drove America's automotive dreams? Once the glittering hub of industrial power and innovation, it now stands as a haunting reminder of what happens when prosperity fades. In the mid-1900s, Detroit was a symbol of strength, home to the world's most powerful automakers and a thriving middle class. But just a few decades later, the Motor City was struggling. The decline began slowly in the 1950s, as the automotive industry shifted and factories closed, workers lost their jobs, and with them, their homes and livelihoods. Suburbanization lured people away, and racial tensions boiled over into violence. The riots of 1967 were a turning point, leaving the city scared and divided. By the 1980s, Detroit's once vibrant streets were now filled with the abandoned buildings, high crime rates, and a population that had dwindled by half. The very industries that built it were now in crisis, unable to compete with global competitors. Detroit's fall culminated in 2013 when the city filed for bankruptcy, the largest in US history. Yet, despite its deep wounds, Detroit's story is not over. The city is fighting to rise again, looking toward a future of innovation, culture, and a relentless will to survive. The Motor City may have stalled, but it's not out of gas yet. Which urban planning failure story impacted you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know if you'd like to see a part 2 exploring more urban planning failures. Join us next time as we delve deeper into the events that have shaped our cities, because every urban planning has a story worth telling.